Hello everybody and welcome to this third and final video on form where I'm going to look at poetry form. We've talked already, and hopefully you've watched the previous two videos, about what form is, in the same way that we can imagine buildings and there are certain types of buildings like a hospital and we know it's a hospital before we even have to go into it. Form is the same way. We can classify writing which has a distinctive framework without even having to read it. You can pick up a poem and know it's a poem. Now, just like a hospital has lots of subsections such as A&E and the operating theatres and the admin, the offices, poetry has a lot of sub-forms, and I want to talk a little bit about them today, or a couple of them, and just try to link them to meaning, because there's no point in just sort of identifying something. We've got to link it to the meaning. So let's have a think about the poem My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. This is a dramatic monologue. Now, in terms of poetry on the whole, poetry expresses thoughts and ideas through distinctive style and rhythm, often but not always rhymes, and contains a lot of figurative language. That's the form of poetry. My Last Duchess is a dramatic monologue. What that means is that there is somebody speaking to somebody else. We never hear from the person who's being spoken to. And this is crucial about a dramatic monologue, the person who's speaking is not the poet. They're taking on a distinct persona, a character. So in My Last Duchess, Robert Browning takes on the Duke of Ferrara, and that's not who he is. He's taking on a character. We have lots of dramatic monologues that we study. Now, why is that important? Because if we just wrote about that in the exam, it wouldn't get us anywhere, just showing off that we know it's a dramatic monologue. Well, this poem is all about control and power, and it's about how the Duke is domineering and controlling and overbearing and overpowering, and the way he was with his wife and how he had her killed, all the rest of it. So the form actually reflects and helps to portray that controlling attitude, because in a dramatic monologue we never hear from the person who is being spoken to, and as a result it reflects the fact that the Duke is overbearing and overpowering, because literally the other guy never even gets a word in. He just dominates the entire conversation, does the Duke. So the use of the dramatic monologue form is perfect there. Now, that's just one example. Another form is the sonnet. We have quite a number of sonnets in the anthology. Ozymandias is a sonnet. We have the Shakespearean Sonnet 116. We have Elizabeth Barrett Browning's Sonnet 43. Now, what is a sonnet? Well, it's a type of love poetry, Italian. The Italian Petrarch was most famous for developing what we now know as the Petrarchan Sonnet. He fell in love with somebody called Laura and wrote 366 poems of unrequited love to her. And it follows a very strict form. Now, there are two types of sonnet that we look at today. The Shakespearean sonnet, which was developed further from the Petrarchan sonnet. And the Petrarchan sonnet, the first one has a ABBA rhyme scheme, and then at the end, it's normally CDE, CDE. The Shakespearean sonnet is in iambic pentameter and has a rhyme scheme that's different, ABAB, CD, CD, EF, EF, GG. Now, we can identify sonnets, and we can talk about them. And why is that important? Well, on a simple level, we can say that Sonnet 116 uses the form of a love poetry, a sonnet, and therefore it's clearly about love, which is interesting when we identify the fact that the poem is to a man, and the debate within the poem is it platonic friendship relationship, or is it a romantic relationship? And we can weigh in and say just the use of the sonnet form, which is a form related to romantic poetry, seems to be important in helping us debate that. But similarly, then there are other sonnets. So Ozymandias is all about the changing nature of power, how this Ozymandias thought he was so powerful and had this big statue, as you can see on the screen, but it ultimately broke and crumbled away, and it's about how power doesn't last forever. And the use of the sonnet form in that poem is much more complex, because it actually begins as a Petrarchan sonnet, following the Petrarchan sonnet rhyme scheme, moves on to a Shakespearean sonnet with that rhyme scheme, and then the last third of the poem is actually still a sonnet, but the rhyme scheme is completely different again. So we can actually say that the poet is subverting the genre, the form, is using the sonnet, but is deliberately changing the sonnet form from Petrarchan to sonnet to ultimately something totally new, and that reflects how how power changes and doesn't stay set in one place, just as the form doesn't. So there's levels. There's identifying the form, and then there's linking it with a simple explanation, like sonnets are about love, and then there's taking it one stage further, like this. So hopefully you found that helpful, and please do subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you soon.